So, my name's Lauren. I'm on the Ward 2 Steering Committee. Welcome to the NPA portion of our evening. Before we get started, though, I do just want to give a quick shout out to our musician, Brian. If everyone wants to give Brian a round of applause. And of course, the crew in the back with the community dinner. Did we have a good dinner tonight? And dessert is served if you haven't gotten it already. I literally just ate one, so I have a sugar rush to propel me. All right, so just quickly going over our agenda, we have a full meeting tonight. So first we'll have our public forum, as always. Because it is the first meeting of the school year, we will be voting on our steering committee members. So if you are not a Ward 2 resident, that is okay. You just can't vote when we put up to vote. If you are a Ward 2 resident, you are eligible to vote. Then we will have a presentation and room for questions for from the interim chief of police of Burlington Police Department, Chief Burke. And then finally, we will have a presentation from a different Ward Steering Committee member, Jonathan Chappell-Sokol and Carter Newbowser, who is the Ward 1 City Councilor, about a proposed resolution between the city and the NPAs. So with all that in mind, can I have a motion to approve the agenda? Anybody? Constance, thank you. And a second? Roxanne. All right, thanks everyone. All right, so public forum, does anyone have, and if you're sharing for public forum, just please state your name, pronouns, what street you live on, and ward if it's outside of Ward 2.
Hello, I'm Johnny Cash.
Welcome, Man in Black.
Hopefully there's a lot of Ward 3 residents here. Next month, this steering committee may semi-be aware or not. Ward 3 sort of disbanded and evaporated, and certain members of it decided to do their own thing, but it wasn't legal. So next month we'll be conducting steering committee elections for Ward 3. And we're going to resume Ward 2 and 3 as a collective operation back here. And there, so if you know anybody that wishes to run for Ward 3 Steering Committee, it's an innocuous position that is unpaid. You don't even get free parking. You get some nice accolades. But please, if you're in Ward 3, and if you don't know where Ward 3 is, it's somewhere over there, and it goes somewhere that way. And then it stops and then comes back. And it goes down to the waterfront, but you have to look up online. But please join us. I will be running to return to the steering committee after 5 years of absence, 6 years. And hopefully everything will go back to being a collaborative and friendly, cohesive unit, Ward 2 and 3, and operate to the betterment of our Wards 2 and 3.
Thank you. I will just add that we would have to do a vote, I believe. I think it's a little gray if we were to rejoin, but we would have to vote. Maybe. There might be some semantics to it, but thank you, Patrick.
Thank you. Oh, so sweet. I have a couple of things. I actually have a lot of things on my mind, but I don't have, we're going to have Chief Burke here tonight, which I think is great, because Murad was always afraid to show his face. Yes, I said it. When we talk about journalism, quote unquote, WCAX did a story, and they said that Mayor Mulvaney Stanek refused an offer from Governor Scott to have Vermont State Police come to Burlington. I sent an email to WCAX. They said to me, based on the governor's previous offer to Mayor Weinberger, they quote-unquote inferred that a quote-unquote offer had been made to Mayor Mulvaney Stanek. There was no expressed or explicit offer from Governor Scott. The truth matters. Now, then they went on to say, because Mayor Mulvaney Stanek said that she wouldn't accept that, she would say no, then she would say no to that offer. Well, Mayor Mulvaney Stanek said a lot of other things, and I always encourage you to watch meetings, even at least the mayor's updates, so that you know what's going on and why she said what she said. I find this to be poor journalism, and I'm very disappointed in my fellow counselor who ran with it and said things that were not true without verifying the information himself, when in fact the mayor's office was saying there was no such offer. This is deeply problematic, because you can have ideas that you want to talk about and you can claim to be collaborative, but when you're insulting the mayor and insulting your fellow counselors, how are we supposed to get things done? The other thing I want to talk about quickly is political violence. There was a message, and I know that some of you received messaging from the Democratic Party. You might have received something from Becca McKnight today. I was a counselor that liked a satirical cartoon. And I like the satirical cartoon because the counselor that was in the cartoon has actively been lying about me and criticizing my work. You might have seen some videos that I did recently. I was trying to show the joy of being in the city of Burlington if you're a resident or a visitor, and they tried to turn it into something else, regretfully. It's a form of political violence to lie about another counselor. It's a form of political violence to dismiss somebody's work. And when they bring it to the attention, when I bring and I say, hey, here's your proof, and you still called me a liar, that's a form of political violence. It's a form of political violence to make up data in order to attack marginalized people and the people who volunteer to help them. It's a form of political violence to accept that gun violence is the #1 cause of death of children in our country. It's a form of political violence to accept homelessness in one of the richest countries in the world. So we can define political violence in a number of ways. Obviously, as a black woman, I had no love for Charlie Kirk. But did I want him murdered? Of course not. And to imply such that I would be okay with that is a form of political violence. I'm way over my time. Thank you for listening. I'm probably going to talk about this more, but please pay attention. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Grant. Any other public forum? I believe we have a couple more minutes. Anyone else? Anyone else? Still have 4 minutes. All right. Great. So I can take some time to segue into our next topic, which is a vote on the new steering committee for this year. So if you're a Ward 2 resident, if you aren't familiar, we do have bylaws in which we run this NPA meeting by. Each NPA, each ward has their own set of bylaws, and ours say that we are to elect or re-elect our steering committee every September. So today, all 5 of the steering committee members will be rerunning for another term, but we also wanted to open the floor if there is anyone else that was interested in running. And you don't have to run today. We have room for 6 people on our steering committee, and you can run it any time during the year. We just have to warn a vote on it. So if you're kind of interested and want to learn more, you can certainly think about it, reach out to us. We're happy to meet up for coffee or anything like that. So that's if you're interested in running. If you're interested in being involved, but not necessarily as part of the steering committee, our steering committee meetings are open. So we do advertise them. They're typically on the third Monday of the month at the CCTV studios. And anyone is able to come to them. So if you'd like to come, learn a little bit more, maybe offer some suggestions, you are more than welcome. My only caveat is that we do sometimes reschedule them because of scheduling issues. Like this month, I think we're going to have to. So please just email us beforehand so we can make sure to get you correct information. So anyone is always able to come. You're also always able to find us at dinner. We have added new forms. Are they on the table in the back? So if you're interested in the next lowest level, I'm starting at most involvement to least involvement with your NPA. So we have started putting out forms. So if you have any suggestions for what you'd like to hear, how you'd like to see these meetings run, we have some papers in the back. Lisa's holding them up. Thank you. We also have that available online if you are like me and have terrible handwriting. The online version is accessible through our website and also through our link tree. There is a QR code on the agendas that should be on most of the tables. So that's 3 differing levels of involvement that you can have in the steering committee. We would love to have you. So with that, I guess we can start with our current steering committee. We can just quickly introduce ourselves since we haven't done that formally for a while. Sorry to put you guys on the spot. And then I will take an open call for anyone to nominate someone else or nominate themselves, and then we will vote. So I'll start. I'm Lauren. This will be my 4th term on the steering committee if I am elected. I live on North Ave, and I really value being part of the steering committee. It's been a really great way to get to know all of you better, as well as my community. I also love to plan things, so it plays very well into my strengths. So I'm looking forward to another term, hopefully. Yeah, I'm going to make you guys stand up. And where's Charlie? Next, our newest steering committee member. Sorry, Nori, you run so soon after.
Okay, good evening, everyone. As Lauren mentioned, my name is Nora Ahrens. I use she, her pronouns. I joined the Ward 2 steering committee just back in June, 4 short months ago. You all voted for me, and I live in Ward 2, obviously, on North Union Street, right next to the food shelf. And you can look at the recording from June's meeting. I gave a little speech as to why I think I am a meaningful part of the steering committee. But in general, I think the NPAs are a wonderful tool for the city to use to build community and the best Burlington we can be. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Mark. I use he, him pronouns. I live on Decatur Street. I joined the Ward 2 Steering Committee in November of last year. After I came to volunteer for community dinner, saw what was happening here, was really eager to get involved. I think grassroots.
And just like the potentials of NPAs and like what it means for building democratic sort of methods of running things in like contemporary society. So love being on the steering committee, would love to keep going.
Okay, so I'm Charlie Giannone. I've been on the steering committee since Bernie Sanders, or I was around here. So in light of that situation, there's 6 seats available, but if we ever get more than 6 people interested, I'd be happy to just step off, okay? Because the steering committee is very well staffed right now, but there's always room for more. And the reason I encourage people to get on the steering committee is because you develop a lot of skills when you're on the steering committee. And you meet a lot of city officials and department heads, like there's one right back there at the back of the room. And you meet city councilors, like in the back of the room there. So it's a really good thing to do. It's not much of a time commitment. You go to one little steering committee meeting, like on some Monday for a couple of hours, and then you come to this meeting. So you come to the dinner, and then you stay for the meeting. So it's really a great opportunity to make an impact on your community. So if there's more people interested than our 6 seats, and right now there's not, but if we ever get enough people that you bump me off, just go ahead and bump me right off, and I'd be happy to do that. So best kept secret in Burlington is being on a steering committee for an NPA in Burlington. Thank you.
Thanks, y'all. All right, are there any nominations from the floor, whether for yourself or someone else? And if you nominate someone else, I would ask that they accept. We're not gonna blindly just force someone into the steering committee. All right, yes. Or if there's any questions, are you nominating yourself or do you have a question? Welcome, introduce yourself.
My name's Grace Sherwood. I use she, her pronouns. I live right across the street that way. And I've lived in Burlington for 5 years now. And I really love it here. And it makes me really sad to see, I think, people around here lose a lot of empathy for our city and what it's going through right now. And I still have a lot of empathy, and I would love to be more involved in my steering committee. I love going to these meetings, and I stayed till the bitter end, even though I've never won a prize. So, maybe.
Thank you. All right. Any other nominations or questions? I realized halfway through that I didn't ask if anyone had any questions. Okay, so now is the fun voting part. We don't vote often in these meetings, so I just want to remind everyone of the rules. So only Ward 2 residents can vote, and I meant to mention this when Patrick was talking. So Ward 2 is anything north of North Street, so if my directions are right, that way, and north, pretty much the boundaries more or less exist, but if you are not sure, feel free to ask me. I have a better knowledge in my brain from working elections so often. But okay, so I think we need to do this one by one. Yeah, I guess we'll do it one by one because then we will take a number and have that reflected in the minutes. So can someone facilitate me first? Because I feel weird watching people, staring people down and be like, are you voting for me? Everybody raise your hand. So can someone from the steering committee facilitate for me for like a hot second?
Okay. Who would like to nominate Lauren to be on the Ward 2 steering committee? Looks good. Is anyone opposed? I don't know if she knows. Oh, no opposed.
All right, now I'll do Mark since he. All right, all those in favor of Mark being on the steering committee? Okay, now I have to count. 1, 2. All those opposed? All those opposed? Jean, are you opposed? All right, welcome back, Mark. Next up, Nora. This is, again, especially fun since we just voted her on, but our bylaws say September. So all those in favor of re-electing Nora? All right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28. Whatever this number was, it was either 28 or 20. Anyone opposed? All right, yay, Nora, welcome back. All right, Kaysen, all those in favor of re-electing Kaysen to the steering committee? Okay. All right, same number. Anyone opposed? All right. And I'm doing my best Robert's rules by continuously counting. This is taxing my brain this late in the evening. All those in favor of Charlie G being reappointed to the steering committee? You, is the hat an extra vote, Charlie? All right. Same number. And opposed? Welcome back, Charlie. And last but certainly not least, Grace. All those in favor of Grace joining the steering committee? Same number. And anyone opposed? All right. Thank you, everyone. Yay, voting. Yay, Grace. All right. So how am I doing on time? Does anyone, I'll just reiterate this again because we just have a couple more minutes, but we are, like Charlie said, we love having people involved in the steering committee, and just because you're not a voting member of the steering committee does not mean you have a say. So please feel free to come to our meetings. Please feel free to drop suggestions via paper or via the interwebs on our Google form, or just email us. And I know many of you know us through our various capacities in the city, so we're always happy to take suggestions. This is a group meeting. We're just the ones who facilitate the discussion. So please provide input. We are happy to have it. And are there any questions, I guess? Last call for questions. Okay. Is the chief here? Okay. I thought I didn't get a chance to introduce myself, but I was hoping that was who you were. Nice to meet you, Chief, and welcome to the NPA. I'll pass off the microphone. Lauren, great to meet you. Here you are. Perfect. Just try and stay in the middle because it does feedback if you're too close to the speakers.
Got it. All right. Can you hear me okay? All right. Thanks for having me here tonight. It's my second NPA this week, and what it reminds me of about it really is how special Burlington is. You know, this is unique to have neighborhood planning assemblies, and I think you should be really proud, especially the crowd that you amass here. And I understand that dinner time was a little more full. But having said that, so my name is Sean Burke. I serve as your interim chief of police. I just started my 32nd year of Vermont municipal policing. My career began in Woodstock, Vermont, a very small town. I was there from 94 to 97. I became a Burlington police officer in February 97. Served in this very neighborhood as a patrol officer, as a brand new patrol officer until about 2001, where I found my way into detectives and then up through the ranks, having separated from service in 2018. And I became the police chief in the city of South Burlington. I served there for just about the last 7 years, came back to serve for the mayor at the end of March of this year, and really proud and honored to be able to fill this role at a time where the city is going to go through a meaningful search process for your next permanent police chief. And I think that's important. I encourage folks to stay engaged with that process once the steps are announced, because Burlington deserves and needs a unique candidate for this job. And without community voices helping to form what that profile is, it'll make it a much more difficult job for the recruiter and subsequently the mayor to land on the right person for this important role. So just a little bit about the state of the department. So in the patrol side of the house, where you see everyone in uniform, or even our detective side, anyone sworn an actual police officer, we've got 61 folks employed there. One of those persons is down at the Vermont Police Academy doing really well right now, so we're excited to have her back in about another 10 weeks. In terms of where we are in our patrol function, we run a day shift with about 5 officers, an evening shift with about 5 officers, and then there's a sliver of time between 3 and 7 in the morning where we have between 2 and 3 officers available for calls for service. In concert with that, we also have our community support liaisons. So these are social work folks that we're using to respond to incidents involving mental health, welfare check, overdose, and suicidal persons. They're also augmented by our relationship with the Howard Street Outreach Team. And again, that team also less than clinician level employees, but again, field-based, meeting people where they're at in the moment, getting for the most part, people connected back to the services that maybe they slipped away from or they haven't been introduced to yet. And this is not terribly unique to Burlington. The street outreach team has been around for over 2 decades, so we're pretty familiar with this work. Community support liaisons were developed post-2020, and some of the work that we're doing in the moment is actually identifying how to best use these resources. Because we've known for a long time that police officers, because we used to be really plentiful and pretty affordable, they would just assign us to anything. We would just go to whatever the challenge was. We'd try to stabilize it in the moment and move on. And we would complain about that. So fast forward to now, where we're actually being a little more strategic and using other professional staff to meet the growing and really complicated public safety issues that we face in the community. In addition to those employees, we also have another segment of employees referred to as the community service officers. So these are not sworn officers, but rather city employees with enforcement powers related to city ordinance. They'll do things like direct traffic at a crash scene. They take minor crash reports. They handle all of our found property. And most importantly, they serve as our animal control function, which, again, used to fall to a police officer, and that's not a good use of that resource, especially now because nationwide we know that the applicant pool is pretty small for police officers. Our hiring standards are quite high, and now, given the economics of employing police officers, we need to be strategic in how we're using those human resources. So overall, we do have a need in our organization for more sworn police officers. I'm always a little stunned by the fact that we don't have a lot of Burlingtonians applying to join our police force. When you're trying to really grow a police force that's reflective of the community, there's really no better spot than the community itself to search out for those applicants. So if you, sitting here tonight, or anyone that you know think might want to answer a call for service for your community, I would love to see more Burlington applicants in our hiring process. It's a really rewarding career. I mean, of my 32 years, I've done now the better part of 22, a little over 22 years of police service here in this city, and I can't think of a better spot. So please keep that in mind. I want to talk about kind of where we are over the last 5 months since I've taken over the helm of the police department. We knew with our finite resources that we were going to have some public safety challenges. City Hall Park has always been a perennial friction point in this community. And I knew after kind of the work that the BPD had done last year to address a lot of challenges on Buell Street and in the city parking garages that it was logical that City Hall Park was a place that we would begin to focus immediately. And we did so using all of the assets that I just described to you, all the human resources that I just described to you, to be proactive in these spots. And when I say proactive, what I mean is when officers are reacting to a call from the public, a call for service, that time is just that, reactionary time. And then they have discretionary time, and that's used in a couple of different ways. One is to catch up on your reports, do your email, read policies, stay up on professional standards. And then the other is proactive activity. So what we have been doing is directing all of our proactive measures in the corridor downtown in City Hall Park in a very, very strategic way, a little haphazard in the sense that the resources, the human resources are called away to answer other calls for service. But again, strong focus in the downtown corridor. And we've presented a number of data sets at Public Safety Committee and to the Police Commission, more limited set at City Council, really showing how that trend line is up in a way that is double-digit percentile and way, way above the 5-year average. So we've gotten a lot of compliments for that work, but we realize that the work also has some limitations. And in response to a recent City Council resolution, we've kind of doubled down on some of those efforts. And now what we're really trying to do is examine the root cause of a lot of the behavior related to what has been phrased as crime and disorder in our downtown. I don't disagree with that. We do struggle with public drug use. We do struggle with disorder in the park. But we're also faced with this challenge of being the center for social services, which I believe Burlington has always been very, very proud of. But there's some sense of a lack of accountability. But a lot of these folks are also unhoused. And when you think about how a person may behave if they were housed in a living room or in their own yard. The societal norms are slightly different than what we expect in civic spaces like City Hall Park. And I do believe that our enforcement strategy right now is moving the needle in some regard in trying to just bring back some semblance of shared fair use of these spaces. But I will tell you that enforcement alone will not solve the challenges that are downtown. What I see a lot of evidence of is underlying mental health issues, and we know that despite our best efforts with our resources between our staff and the street outreach team, that there's a lot of limitations at the state level with the Department of Mental Health. I also see a lot of struggles with substance use disorder. The access has improved for substance use disorder treatment, but there's still this factor that we have to address, and that's really people don't find a lot of success in drug treatment until the moment is right for them. And oftentimes that takes many attempts at treatment. So I think, when I heard this theme come up about empathy, that we try and to instill this in our team, that we need to lead with empathy. We need to meet people where they're at. And what I was taught by a longtime Burlington Police Lieutenant Emmett Helrick is that it costs us zero to leave people with their dignity. So, I try to impress that upon our officers because, we can experience to some degree some compassion fatigue because it becomes mechanical at times. But I do feel that it's important to have that as definitely part of the fabric in our organization. I think, some of the lead in to the resolution, there was a notion that we were not enforcing the law. We've provided data that we are enforcing the law. And in fact, there are some struggles with the criminal legal system that are really confounded with the state constitution around who is held in jail pretrial and who is released. And it really kind of distills to this. If you commit a nonviolent crime in the state of Vermont and you are a resident, you are going to be released pretrial. If you perpetrate a serious violent crime, like we saw recently down on Church Street, you will likely be held on a bail pending trial. It's that simple. So when we talk about the turnstile effect or the catch and release, it's really not a policy of any one office. It's not the practice of any one judge, but it's actually founded in our Constitution and has been affirmed a few different times when debated at the State House. So absent a legislative change in that regard, that's really how our criminal legal system works. So I remind our staff, and I try to engage with the community about this very point, the job of the police is not justice. The job of the police is simply public safety. We respond to or react to incidents in progress, stabilize those, bring safety, determine facts. If there's evidence of a crime, make referrals. And that is our relationship with the criminal legal system. Once we file those cases, it is up to the prosecutor, the defense, and the judiciary to close those cases and provide a path for the person to mend their harms and move on. In regards to our city ordinance construct, it's a little different there. We strayed away from having the criminal penalties available for certain city ordinances. So recently, the administration brought up a new or proposed ordinance change. It's now gone all the way through the process and is ready for to be enacted. And really what it allows for in our Burlington City Code of Ordinances under Chapter 21, there's a whole host of things like urination in public, disorderly conduct, unlawful trespass, public drug use, on and on. And what the new construct will allow for when we issue a municipal ticket, which is a civil violation like getting a speeding ticket, to a person, they essentially have three options. You can pay the waiver fine, BU, and move on. You can engage in a restorative practice being referred to as City Circle. So each Monday, our Community Justice Center will have a restorative process, a restorative circle set up at City Hall where a person can go in. The affected party, if there is one, a crime victim, can participate in the process. There'll be community volunteers, discuss how the impulsive decision of the responsible party, the person ticketed, negatively affects everyone, and then they can enter into contract to resolve that conduct. If you're service treatment resistant or just prone to throw caution to the wind and ignore your ticket, the city attorney can file the matter in the criminal legal system, and the city attorney would then be the prosecutor in those cases down on Cherry Street for ultimate accountability. Of course, we would like to see some voluntary accountability, and what I know from my experience in the criminal legal system, particularly related to restorative justice, when a person goes through a restorative justice process for a low-level offense and completes their contract, the rate of recidivism is simply lower. It's that easy. It's much harder to participate and complete a contract than it is to go in and pay a waiver fine, whether it's via the mail with a ticket or to the bench in court. So we're optimistic about that because I think we will be able to actually deliver a little more accountability in terms of, again, the things that we hear a lot of: public drug use, open container in public spots, and other disorder in the park. Moving on to some housekeeping things as I sit here as the interim chief of police. I mentioned recruitment briefly. One thing that we've been doing is really drilling down on an actual recruitment plan, a strategy. The city has invested in the police department greatly when you think about fiscal resources in terms of our ability to recruit and retain new officers. We're using social media, targeted digital marketing on top of our presence at places like the Champlain Valley Fair. We were up at the ballpark this year with the Lake Monsters. We'll be going back to tabling events at colleges and universities that we know we typically have decent luck of recruiting folks. But on the back end of that, through social media and targeted digital marketing, we will know if our efforts are worth anything because we get a data return. So we can measure the actual click-throughs to our career site and then to the application process, and hopefully do a better job of identifying what's working for us in our recruitment efforts and what we should leave alone. So I'm optimistic about that. As of yesterday, we've got 62 applications thus far this year, so that's more than we had in all of 2024. I aspire to get back to our 21 and 22 levels of 150 applicants, because that's just about the number of folks that we need to screen in order to hire about 8 officers per year. 8 officers per year is our metric, simply because there's 2 police academies that run each year, and we have just enough field training officers to receive those officers from the academy in lots of 4, and then run them through our 14-week field training process. So to become a police officer, we hire you, we sponsor you, you go to the Vermont Police Academy for 17 weeks. That's a pretty tenable police officer that comes back to us. But then there's a 14-week field training process, which is virtually a crawl, walk, run, where the new officer begins as kind of a ride-along, an observer. Then there's a bit of a warm handoff of tasks, culminating in the senior officer, the field training officer, just being a silent partner in evaluating the new candidate's suitability for solo level patrol. So it's a big investment, and that's why we have the stringent screening and hiring standards that we have in place. So we hope to really advance that work soon, because we are in need of sworn staff, as I mentioned before. The other couple of areas of focus that I have on my plate in this interim role is bringing a lot of the state mandated model policy into compliance. The Police Commission has been a strong partner in advancing that work, because I want to have the table set for the new chief that will come into the organization, in concert with preparing folks from officers to detectives to sergeants to lieutenants to deputy chiefs to be prepared to take the next step on the ladder, the next rung on the ladder. Historically, the Burlington Police Department had been a factory of police executives that have gone on to serve as public safety commissioners, police chiefs, you name it. That talent still lies within our organization. We just need to build a little bit of runway through this interim period, invest in those employees to get them the education and experience that they need to step up into the roles that we need them to here in the near future. So having said that, I'm happy to kind of stop talking and take any questions that folks may have.
Hello, I live on Green Street. Do you feel like we need the state police in our town? Or would you, if you did feel that way, would you ask the mayor and then the mayor would then ask the governor? And do you think maybe it would be a benefit or would it be a hindrance?
Thanks for that question. I should have answered that one proactively. I did last night at the other NPA meeting. So Colonel Matt Birmingham is the director of the Vermont State Police, and he and I talk on a very regular basis. The state police has just about the same vacancy percentile that the Burlington Police has, and they too come under criticism for not being able to attend to things like traffic enforcement on the interstate and other things that the state police used to be able to do. You know, it's important to note that the state police in Vermont, they're responsible as the primary police service for about 180 towns. There's only about 50 or so, maybe closer to 65, I guess, police departments, municipal police departments in the state. So they're stretched for resources. And we talk about our lack of resources in areas where we could partner, areas that we should think about, but either one of us feel as though that I should be sending resources to him or he should be sending resources to me. Where we do rely on the Vermont State Police is for special teams. So I think you folks are probably familiar, we had a pretty high profile incident recently on Pearl Street where we needed a bomb squad. That's supplied by the Vermont State Police. We had an officer involved in a shooting on North Prospect Street. They provide the independent review. The detectives come in and do that criminal investigation. And that's where we feel we should be sharing resources. And in our roles, both for the colonel and myself, we're simply advisory to our boss. So I advise the mayor on where I feel we are in terms of the police service that we're able to provide, and the colonel does the same way, does so in the same way. Now, given the fact that we're both strapped for staff, I do not feel that it's a fair ask for us to say we need uniformed state troopers to join us here in Burlington when they don't have sufficient resources to do their job. We are in a very similar situation, and it does, I am not proud when I get requests from other neighborhoods about we have a traffic safety problem in this neighborhood, our doors were checked on our cars in this neighborhood. Sometimes there's work that we simply don't get to, but that's the experience in a lot of communities. And the lack of police officers is not unique to Burlington nor Vermont. This is a nationwide trend. Post 2014 and the events that went on in Ferguson, we saw a cooling in the number of people that were looking to become police officers, and that certainly got almost ice cold post 2020 for a lot of reasons. And now what we're finding, though, in the folks that are attracted to service, they know exactly what community expects of the police. They are really kind of hip and excited about the work that we're doing, but there's just not a lot of those applicants. So we'll just have to kind of wait and see where that trend goes. Again, application numbers are up, but we're not compromising our standards. And I hope that we can also find some other work across the organization for our community support liaisons and street outreach workers, because that would then actually kind of complete the experiment that began in 2020 in how many police officers do you need to police a city. And I don't think there's any great metrics, like the FBI will use a population base, but a population base doesn't speak anything to your crime rate. And there's a couple other different metrics that no one in our profession is super excited or find a lot of credibility in.
Welcome, Chief. My question is, what is the BPG protocol responding to domestic violence calls, especially for repeat offenders?
Yes, thank you for that question. So regardless, when we get a call for domestic violence, we send 2 officers, and that's also a call that we would expect the field supervisor to respond to. And once we get there, domestic violence situations are easy to look past and say like, oh, it's only a verbal quarrel this evening, not much going on here. What's important is that we take the time, separate the parties, and really understand what led to this incident. What else has been going on in the family? Because as probably many of you understand, domestic violence becomes really entrenched in a domicile, and there's a lot to unpack. And sometimes we'll learn that maybe there was an assault in this particular incident, but there may have been an assault a week before, and those are all things that we can take action to. We also have additional resources that we can bring to bear. We have a full-time domestic violence advocate that can follow up with survivors of domestic violence, and then in the moment, we have a process where we can assist a domestic violence victim in obtaining a temporary abuse prevention order. And ultimately, though, in any case where we have probable cause, so sufficient evidence to believe a domestic assault has occurred, we make an arrest, and that's a statutory expectation.
Thanks. All right. Thanks, Chief Burke. I just wanted to ask you what your thoughts are on the future of the CIAP program and the CARES program, and how you see that fitting in with future work in the police department.
Yeah, certainly. So the CAPE is actually the division in which encompasses our community support liaisons, also the CARES team, which is a clinical level service, and our domestic violence advocate. So as we begin to really refine what was built in, I would say, a very chaotic time. So post-2020, these resources were brought online. There wasn't a great deal of time afforded the organization to stand up a lot of policy or protocol. And we're starting to do that work now. So more recently, I kind of described the work that the community support liaisons and street outreach are going to do with one another. Domestic violence advocate work I described. In terms of the CARES program, that's a state grant that ends the end of December. We have 2 employees in that role currently. The administration did not fund in our budget this year for funding for the CARES program moving beyond January 1. So where we're working right now is with the designated agency with Howard. Howard Street Outreach has been a long-term partner. The city did have to increase the annual fiscal contribution to the street outreach team from about $80,000 to almost $250,000. And actually the designated agency is the, not to use agency over and over again, but is the agency identified by the Department of Mental Health to provide the clinical level of services to the community. So we're ironing out all those pieces currently.
Hey, thanks for your time and thanks for coming. You alluded earlier to a belief that there are root causes behind the challenges our city faces, and I share that same belief. What kind of steps do you think your department can take in identifying those root causes and helping solve those root causes?
Yeah, so that's been a lot of our work in public safety for nearly the last decade. And because we've been looking at this mental health crisis for a long time. And I will say that more crisis services have been brought online, but there are real limitations in terms of someone that's in the community causing harm, being very disruptive. If their behavior teeters into committing a crime, we can arrest that person, we can refer them to the criminal legal system. Most of the time, those folks are released on what's called a non-hospitalization order. And what that does is it puts the person back out in the community, and the onus is on the person to work with the designated agency to work on their mental health underlying challenge. And there isn't a lot of follow-up or accountability in that process. That's an okay articulation of that situation. I will say that our prosecutor, Sarah George, does a much better job of articulating the problems with that process. So I'd say our role in that is identifying, like, this person is escalating until we arrest them. And that's not, the best solution. So in that regard, the administration worked closely with the state of Vermont, specifically the Department of Public Safety this year, to secure a grant for a project called the Situation Table. Situation Table has brought together not only all the government actors in public service in emergent public safety response, but all of our non-government actors, the hospital, designated agency, and others. And we assemble once a week cases involving individuals in the community that are at an acute elevated risk of harm to themselves or others are presented at the table. They're screened through a series of filters, and then the last filter, filter 4, is a team that's designated to go out and have an intervention with the person within 24 to 48 hours. So this hasn't been added work for anyone, but rather really greater synchronization of services. And what we have seen is more stabilization of people in the community and just wrapping them up with the right services. I will say that like the police department, whether it's through a police officer or a community support liaison, have really kind of identified a lot of the situations that have been presented, but we're on very few, the police are on very few of the filter 4 teams because it is some type of behavioral health or unmet social service challenge that's out there. I think Chittenden County is pretty wealthy in terms of the number of services that we have, and I believe that the table is bringing just greater focus to the group to bring, again, the right resource to the right challenge. Much the same related, back to your question, much the same related to substance use disorder. We know that, especially with opioids, that this isn't like a social choice. This isn't like going out and maybe smoking marijuana or using cocaine. Like if you are addicted to opioids, you not only have the psychological addiction, but rather the physical addiction to the drug, and that it's gonna take a lot of work to get you in a spot where you're ready for treatment. So oftentimes, we do have to make referrals to the criminal legal system. There is a treatment court here in Chittenden County that's pretty effective at helping people find success through that process. But again, at times that can be very vexing as well. And when I hear a lot of people lament about whatever the condition might be, when I'm on the ground downtown and you see someone that's experienced an overdose, perhaps they're laying on the concrete in the restroom in City Hall Park, you know firsthand this person doesn't want to live this way. Right? And that's where you have to remember to kind of center back to empathy. So I think perhaps our job in that realm too is to highlight where we might see gaps in treatment, but also recognizing that we're not going to arrest our way out of the drug crisis. Like our country knows that. I spent a long time as a drug investigator here in Burlington, and we would focus our time on the groups here profiting. And we still do that today with our drug unit. We've got 4 detectives assigned to drug investigations, and they are focused on mid to upper level traffickers because these folks are not using the product whatsoever, but rather profiting. And they're also involved in the sex trade and the gun trade. There's a lot of guns available in Vermont via straw or illegal purchase or left errantly in cars, unlocked cars, and they're stolen or they're stolen from burglaries. Those are often traded for drugs here in Vermont and then quickly found in crime scenes in southern New England or New York City. So to kind of just put an ending or a finer point on the answer to your question, I believe that we have very clear perspective on in the ability to identify gaps, but then not try to re-engineer ourselves to fill those gaps, but rather come up with new strategies like our community support liaisons or through greater synchronization of social services, like at the situation table, bring the right resource to the challenge.
Sorry, that's me in technology. Thank you for taking on a tough job, first of all. There are a lot of issues, obviously. And to your point about root causes, I certainly think that COVID exacerbated it because people who were living on the edge and lost their jobs are now unhoused and possibly using drugs and everything. So it's tough. And a couple quick points. I feel as though, certainly in my neighborhood, I'm over by the Intervale. So we have a lot of traffic there. Jean's in the middle of it. But I think that a lot of crime is going unreported because many of us have not gotten good results or even empathetic results from the police department. So I'm more concerned than I've ever been living in my neighborhood right now. I never see police patrols. I don't know if they're coming out at different times of day or if they're making patrols at night, but that also feels as though that's been reduced. So with the crime level up, lots of homes getting broken into, cars getting broken into, et cetera. So that's just a little bit of my feedback. So I'm sort of wondering if there are patrols happening. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So we rely on data to inform really what we can do with our limited time for discretionary activities like directed patrols. Now, I know that have had really good engagement, actually, in a couple different instances on Manhattan Drive, but there's some persistent challenges in that neighborhood, given the unhoused that live there, kind of given the quiet nature, too. That perch above the Intervale is kind of just a corner within the city that is prone for some nefarious activity, and we're aware of that. Now, our ability to be all places at once, there's no number of police officers that will do that, but I will say that, we are limited in the time that we're spending in places, like your neighborhood, particularly in the New North End, and to some extent, even the South End. We've been all in, really, on the downtown corridor since April, and post the recent resolution, we kind of doubled down with what little we had. But that's not to say that it's really to address the underreporting scenario. We need to rely on the data. So if you have a service need, please call the police department. You may not get an immediate response. That's just the reality of our staffing situation now. But what it will allow us to do is evaluate where we should be focusing our time. And I had this conversation yesterday with the mayor's chief of staff that although we are doing a lot downtown, I still understand that I have complete autonomy to adjust our posture. So if we've got something that flares up in another neighborhood, we're going to make an adjustment. It's almost like, I've never been a football quarterback, but it's almost like when a football quarterback is at the line and they have to call an audible and change the play. And again, it never makes me feel proud as a Burlington officer to say that you may not get a service in the moment, but I like to just be realistic about things that we can do and can't do. And behind all of that, we have to prioritize when the calls come in. We have to go to the ones that involve violence or danger first, and then we work through the rest.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I've called a couple of times and spoken with people, and the reaction has been, one involved Mike Ryan, and I got the reaction like, oh, it's fine. And so why would I call again? And there have been other instances like that where I've actually spoken with somebody. So that's one of the concerns. And there's a feeling in general about people not reporting things, and that is a concern. You're absolutely right. You need the data. You need to find out where and when things are happening. But when the feedback from the department is like that, it makes it rough. Thanks.
Yeah, of course. I hope, so we've got a lot of new staff in our dispatch center. So I hope that maybe your experience was maybe a year or so old, I hope, because our newer dispatchers definitely are doing an excellent job of having good customer service skills, and we appreciate that. So, but again, that's a testament to them, and we also have in their manager role a long-tenured Burlington Police dispatcher as their leader, and that team has really turned around, as I understand it, over the last 12 months.
Hello. My biggest safety concern in Burlington is traffic safety. I feel like I watch people run red lights like they just don't have to follow the rules with cars, and cars are just killing machines if they're not following the rules, which is insane. And just speeding, and sometimes it comes from cop cars, just kind of like, I know they're getting to it safe, they're doing something, but it almost becomes a danger in itself, the way cop cars are driving, and it makes me kind of scared. Like the other day, I was going down Depot Street, and a cop car that wasn't like, it didn't have sirens on, it was just was driving up Depot Street. I don't know why it chose to go up Depot Street when people there's not a lot of vision, or people can't really see. So making that choice was very concerning to me on a bike. I could have driven right into it. People really speed down that. So that's just one thing. But so I'm thinking at stop signs, the city I moved from had the cameras not that I'm a big fan of cameras, but it got people to stop running red lights. If there's a camera that catches you, it's expensive, but you make money off of it. But I do think it's pretty ridiculous the way people are driving and people are getting hit by cars. So I think that's something we should consider.
Yeah, certainly. So that was actually a big focus of the NPA Ward 1 conversation last night, traffic safety, and our DPW director was there as well. And there needs to be the 3 E's approach, so education, engineering, and enforcement. And I think that engineering is the best way to help calm traffic in a city. And we see great examples of that around Burlington, but it's not everywhere. In terms of enforcement, and I don't say this as an excuse, it's just what happened. Post Ferguson in 2014, we saw a cooling in the amount of traffic stops the police were doing almost nationwide. Around the same time, there was a lot of scrutiny about disparate outcomes with police stops related to race here in the state of Vermont, and that too cooled enforcement in a lot of different ways. At the time, the training that police officers were receiving, and then we called it bias-based policing, it wasn't really the education that we needed. It wasn't until 2016, 2017 that we were actually receiving education how the police were weaponized early on, how marginalized communities have had different experiences with police departments, and that we all have implicit bias. And until you can understand that and not feel like demonized for this job that you took on to serve the public and do the right thing by people, I feel we're really confused. That in a way that we were being, kind of portrayed. Not that all police are perfect. That's not what I'm saying. But I will say that it was vexing at times, and we saw our traffic stop enforcement numbers kind of plummet in that regard. We also in 2015 had a police chief, Brandon Del Pozo, that came here from New York City. And he was very adamant that we use our discretionary time differently. And that was getting out of the cars and being in neighborhoods. And I supported that. So we would consistently have a police officer on North Street walking around, downtown on the marketplace, multiple police officers. And I think that was a great investment because this job is all about relationships and maintaining relationships with folks. And in fact, it's the easiest way to actually solve crime when people trust you. I knew that early on in my career working in this neighborhood by treating people decently, getting them answers, providing them good service. When you needed information to solve a crime, they were there to help you. In terms of automated traffic enforcement, I think it's super effective for a couple of different reasons. One, it doesn't involve a human, so we don't have to worry about the bias. 2, it can be just levied on the car owner. We don't have to worry about identifying the operator. The problem with that in the state of Vermont is it's all predicated on license plate reading technology, which we're not allowed to use. So absent a legislative change, we won't be able to use any traffic cams here in Vermont. But I think that could be a very meaningful strategy. I also will say in terms of like operation of police vehicles, not at all times when we're responding to a call for service will the blue lights and siren always be activated. By way of example, if you're called to a burglary in progress, about 4, 5, 6 blocks away from that scene, you're not going to have any lights or siren on because you don't want to have the perpetrator flee. So you'll see officers doing that. I will say that if you see one of our police cars being operated in a manner that's reckless, pick up the phone, report it to the OIC, or pop onto our website and drop a complaint on the portal there, and we're happy to look into those instances because again, we're humans. It's never perfect, and we have a really good performance management directive in place where we begin with mentoring, coaching, corrective action, and then if we need to, we'll take higher levels of discipline.
This is something, so I have noticed the officers walking around the neighborhoods, which I think is better than being in the cars too. One thing I saw right on North Street, an officer was going into either JP's or the shopping bag, and I was going in too. And it made me really uncomfortable because he was walking in and he had his hand on his gun. And I was walking in and I was like, is something going on in there? Like, and I was in a rush, and I think it was the shopping bag because I, for whatever reason, have a preference. And nothing was happening, but I was like, buddy, like, that's a gun. And I think, it's probably, like I was talking to my girlfriend, she was like, he's probably just resting his hand. But I think it's definitely something to be mindful of, like, just being like, hey guys, not everyone has guns on their hips, and it freaks people out when you're touching them. Like, so, yeah. I didn't say anything in the moment because, I don't know, like we've kind of talked about, I don't really have a relationship with the officers in this town at all, and he was kind of shooting the shit with the other guys in there, and I didn't want to be like, you made me uncomfortable. But yeah, I was like, I definitely think a lot of other people would not love that. So something to just maybe.
Yeah, no, certainly. I appreciate the feedback. I'm guilty of it as well. Like, I'm standing here with my left hand on my pocket. There's not a gun there, but after you walk around with that gear on for a while, you end up resting either your elbow or your hands on the equipment itself. The other thing now that officers wear the external vests, oftentimes you just see them hanging on to their vest like this. And, it's what we do. And I get how it can be perceived as threatening to others. But again, we're humans. And I think it may be an opportunity to be able to get connected with a police officer to say, like, hey, could I ask you a question? Like, why do you do that? And I bet they would say, like, oh, I don't know, it's what I do. But know that our officers are well trained, that our holsters are very, very secure, and we take, the obligation of carrying weapons in the community very, very seriously. They serve a purpose, but they're secure on our persons for a reason.
So I have a quick question. So is there anything happening at the federal level that is helping the Burlington Police Department or restraining the police or hurting the police department?
Yeah, no, thanks for that question, Charlie. So actually, at the federal level, they are our best partner in terms of enforcing drug trafficking laws. So most of the drug trafficking organizations that come here to Burlington, they're either from New York City, Massachusetts, Connecticut, once in a while Philadelphia and elsewhere. But because they tend to traffic in large quantities of drugs, particularly either cocaine or opioids, because they're often often are convicted of violent crimes. Their trade involves also carrying guns, and they're crossing state lines. The federal government will take up the prosecution in those cases. And again, this is really geared towards the people that are profiting. This is not the people that we see living in the street, addicted to substance. This is the group of people that are profiting in the drug trafficking trade. So the United States Attorney's Office, the Drug Enforcement Administration are strong partners there. We also work very, very closely with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. As a few of you have been around for a number of years, in 2022, Burlington saw a big spate of gun violence. We continue to see persistent gun violence at a lesser rate, but using the technology and investigative capabilities of the Bureau of Alcohol and Tobacco and Firearms is very, very critical to advancing public safety in the community. There's no shortage of guns out there running around, and the federal partners in that space simply have greater investigative capacity, greater technology, and then for those that are deserving of being locked up, the federal sentences are heavy.
Me again. Chief, regarding background checks for job applicants, is psychological screening part of the hiring process? Do you look back at school behavior records? Would a juvie conviction be disqualifying?
So in terms of psychological screening, we use an MMPI. It's what the test is called. It's administered through a contract with the Vermont Police Academy. And we find that to be a reliable instrument. Whether or not we dig into behavioral records at like the school level really depends on the age of the applicant and if we're looking for something in the background. So When someone applies to us, again, we interview them. They provide us a full personal history questionnaire. We verify their answers to us on that questionnaire with a polygraph examination, and then we assign that entire case to a detective to go through all of those references, all those previous jobs, institutes of higher learning, to figure out if this person is of the moral character that we need them to be to become Burlington police officers. So I'd say each one is rather unique, but I'm very comfortable in the process that we use.
Would a juvenile conviction be disqualifying?
Depends what it is. Depends what it is. Even an adult conviction, it would depend what it is.
Even an adult conviction?
Yes. Yeah. So if, yeah, by way of example, if somehow, some way, at age 20, you were issued a citation for being a minor in possession of alcohol, and now you're 24 years old, and you said, hey, this is a dumb college thing, and we don't find any evidence of alcohol dependency to a destructive rate or other impulsive behavior, like that's easy to reconcile. With legal marijuana consumption now, that's a challenge for us, because we cannot put a firearm in your hand if you've used marijuana within the last 12 months. So we work through all these different things. We take each individual and work the process, and again, carefully screen for what we know to be risk factors in terms of other behaviors that have manifested over the years.
Is there a mandatory blood and urine testing for substance abuse?
There is a mandatory screening as part of your onboarding process when you go to the city doctor, yes.
Thanks, Chief. And I just want to give my appreciation for the way I think you've turned this department around. For where I'm sitting, it's night and day, and I know that maybe Megan, who lives on the other side of the park in St. Louis, that maybe has not seen the people come by, but I know that your folks have been by a lot. They were at an overdose or some incident today outside my house, so I understand about this. I'm wondering your thoughts on the Overdose Prevention Center.
Yeah, so I serve on the opioid settlement advisory committee to the legislature, and this was debated at length, and it struck me in a couple different ways. One, particularly a community like Burlington, in a de facto way, we've kind of got a few overdose prevention centers running. And really the community, the substance use disorder community, they've adhered to a couple of different things. One, co-use, right? So in case it is fentanyl, in case what they ingest is in fact potentially lethal, that there is someone that can administer Narcan or call for help. Two, it struck me that we weren't going to be able to advance any other ideas about a harm reduction model without testing, having an overdose prevention center somewhere in the state of Vermont. That became very apparent that we just kept centering to it. And then as a law enforcement officer, I just had to stand by the principle of I can get behind it if the legislature makes it legal, and they have done so. Now, I think there will be a host of challenges in terms of where to locate an overdose prevention center in the city of Burlington, because no one's going to want it in their neighborhood. That's compounded by the fact that we know that although overdose prevention centers do, in fact, prevent fatal overdoses from happening, there have been well-documented, I don't want to say studies, but reports and other publications about how conditions in the neighborhood may deteriorate. But I also then come back and I reflect a little bit about how conditions in City Hall Park and around the ancillary blocks have also deteriorated, and perhaps this is an opportunity to bring in some of these folks and get them wrapped around with some supports. My concern ultimately, though, is given the number of social services that we have here in the city of Burlington and the number of folks that are either prohibited from going to places like COTS or feeding chitin, you name it, because they won't follow the rules, what does that look like? Because I feel as though the community is looking for like the ultimate solution to happen next week. And it's just impossible to think that that's ever gonna happen. So I like to really temper expectations. But you know, I I agree with advancing this form of harm reduction model, but I think there's going to be a lot of challenges with this, and we really have got to have reasonable expectations and then a good hard look at what it actually has done during its existence, and not be afraid to really fish or cut bait when the time comes.
Hi. Just a follow-up to that, and thanks for being here tonight, about the Overdose Prevention Center. So what will the police's role be if that becomes operational? Like, for example, I mean, I can foresee that there will be maybe somebody who sets up and starts dealing very close to an overdose prevention center, possibly. So, like, what is the police's role in that?
Yeah, certainly. And we were asked a lot of the same questions when the first methadone clinic was opened up at UHC on South Prospect Street. And the fear there was that drug traffickers were going to lie and wait up there to attract customers. Of course, that's counterintuitive to someone that's going to seek treatment. So we didn't experience that. When I was the chief in South Burlington, we had the Chittenden Clinic there, now on San Remo Drive, and we didn't see drug trafficking activity. Now, did we see other aberrant behavior in that neighborhood? We did. I don't feel as though that a savvy drug trafficker is going to set up directly across the street from an overdose prevention center. It's just a logical spot where the cops might be. So, you know, what we typically see with our drug traffickers, particularly from out of state, is they befriend someone in the community who's got an apartment and therefore has Fourth Amendment privilege, meaning we need a search warrant to get in there and get at them, and they stay behind that door and they use local folks to actually go out in the street and transact the drugs in user quantity. So will that potentially be a challenge? I think so, but we have that going on today. In terms of what our role will be, you know, as municipal police officers, we'll work very, very closely with the administration's advisor on this project. We'll recognize it as a harm reduction model, and we'll have to balance what we have for conduct that's on the street in adjacent neighborhoods and manage and enforce as appropriate there, but recognize that this solution might in fact be better in terms of like addressing conduct, public drug use that we're seeing in other spaces. But again, that's a bit of the wait and see. And then of course, given the current federal administration, there could be, you know, other law enforcement actions that are taken that are not the Burlington Police. And again, wait and see as to what does or does not happen with that. I think it'll be a long time identifying a location. I do not see this project like happening overnight.
I have a question. Hi. Are you worried at all that when you have an officer discharging their weapon or speeding and remaining on payroll, like violating their code of conduct, I'm sure, erodes trust in the community when that person is still on staff, and are you worried at all about what that means, the implications mean for the community at large when they hear that and I guess all in there.
Yeah, certainly, and I totally understand how misconduct on the part of a police officer can erode trust, not only for the officer themselves, but the organization overall. But I also have to remind folks that police officers are employees, and they're afforded all the employment rights that anyone else is in any other job, and that we've got very high conduct standards. We have very strict disciplinary measures that we put in place, and at times I can reconcile the fact that the public's not happy with a disciplinary measure that we've possibly imposed and put the officer back on the street. But it is our job to, you know, do those actions lawfully in accordance with city policy, in accordance with the collective bargaining agreement. And then, you know, particularly depending on how the employees is situated in terms of past performance with the organization, really train and coach them to get them back where we need them. So again, like, police officers are a big expense, but that's not an excuse for keeping a bad cop. But do cops make mistakes? They do. Can those mistakes have really bad outcomes because of the nature of our work. That's absolutely true, and that's why we have, you know, the directive in place that we need in order to honor, again, the community, really the community's expectations and how we hold ourselves accountable, honors the collective bargaining agreement that we have with our police officer union, respects also the city personnel policy, and then provides both a path to make amends, much like we asked for with restorative process with members of the public, or in cases that are completely egregious or so persistent, we'll move you towards very punitive measures that could end up in termination.
We probably have time for one or two more questions.
I'd like to make a suggestion for the location of this upcoming program. Would it not be possible for the city to buy one of the defunct Lake Champlain ferries and have it located there, and there's no longer a NIMBY issue? I say that in all seriousness.
So the mayor actually has an advisor on this project, Teresa Wiesna, and I would encourage you to pose that idea to her and the administration.
Anyone else?
Going once, going twice.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming, Chief Burke. Thank you for the presentation and great questions, everyone. All right, so our last agenda item for today, we actually have another vote still to come, so please stay until the end. This is probably the first ever meeting that I've been in that we have two votes, because first we will have a presentation from Jonathan Chappell-Sokol and Councillor Carter Neubauser on a proposed resolution. So they will give their presentation, and then at the end, we will vote as a Ward 2 NPA of if we are supportive of the resolution before it would go forward to City Council. Did I get the? Okay, great. All right, and with that, I will give you both the floor. These are both, I'll just stay in the speakers, because they feed back with the speakers.
And if you could just, there's something that you one person would want to say.
Yeah, yeah.
At this point, it's probably not.
Yeah, I have hard copies. There are also copies available on our link tree, which is available through the agendas on your table, but I'll also pass out the hard copies.
Well, hi everybody. Thanks for having us. My name's Carter Neubauser. I'm the City Councilor representing Ward 1. I haven't been to Ward 2 MPA in a minute. Oh. All right. Councilor Bergman, ever the mentor, reminding me not to mumble. Fair enough. But as I was saying, Carter Neubauser, Councilor for Ward 1 in Burlington, and then my friend here from Ward 1 as well.
I'm Jonathan Chappell-Sokol. I'm on the steering committee in Ward 1 and worked with Carter and a small team to get this work done.
So what we have in front of you tonight is a resolution we've been working on for a little bit. It's a relatively, not to downplay it, but simple resolution regarding the relationship between the NPAs and city government. And when we say city government, we need sort of the bureaucrats in the best sense of the word, and also elected officials, and then obviously the NPA bodies themselves. So we just want to talk quickly through why we're bringing this to you tonight, why we're spending time on it, and then also what we think some of the practical implications are, and why we think it's sort of an important first step in strengthening NPAs across the city. So very simply, this is a move to formalize the relationship between the city and the NPAs. When we were looking back, when we started this work, we realized there's a lot of norms and practices that a lot of NPAs have adopted over the years, but there's actually not a whole lot of it actually written down as sort of formal practices by the city. So we wanted to, I should say, like part of the reason we think we need to formalize the relationship is that there's often sort of a mismatch of expectations between NPAs and residents, and then city government and folks who are actually carrying out the work, the day-to-day work in city government. So an example of this is like, maybe a change is being made to a public park, and there wasn't necessarily engagement in advance, or at least there's folks who are feeling like, hey, like I didn't have a real chance at input, and now you're coming to me with these decisions that have already been made and sort of telling me about it versus sort of getting my input in advance. So at a very simple level, that's kind of what we're trying to address. And then I'm passing it to Jonathan, I think here.
Okay, just a very brief piece of history, and this work kind of goes back almost 2 years now, I think, and it stems from a little bit of controversy as to where City Council stepped in and made some decisions about how NPAs should operate, and really didn't work collaboratively with the NPAs when they did it, and that raised a question among the NPAs. Folks in Ward 1 and folks in Ward 5 put together essentially a request that went to all the NPAs, which was really a request to City Council that we develop some kind of a policy, just something in writing, a framework that defines the relationship between the NPAs and the city. Every single NPA at the time, as I say, was a while ago, maybe it was close to a little more than a year ago, all the NPAs agreed, and a committee was formed. The committee had 3 NPA Steering Committee members. It had Carter as a representative of the City Council. It had a representative from the City Attorney's Office and a representative from CEDO, who were the administrators for the NPAs at the time. And we met a number of times over the fall and winter and spring this past year, coming into this year. And the work product is what you see in front of you, it's written like a resolution. And I think we can kind of talk through the whereases and the resolves, the recitals and the resolved. And maybe that's your turn at this point.
Yes. Yeah. So, sorry, I'm just looking back at my notes here. So again, again, this is sort of a level set, and to make sure that we are all being good partners as we're trying to work on whatever it might be in front of the NPAs, in front of the city council, in front of city government. And so I think the first thing we wanted to do is just, as good partners, acknowledge a sort of set of value statements from each stakeholder. So the first 2, and actually it's back to you, but I can do the first 2. You do the last 2? Sure. We'll switch it up. So the first section here, if you look at the resolve clauses, the City of Burlington and the neighborhood planning assemblies affirm the following principles: that NPAs are essential to civic life in Burlington, that NPAs ought to be open and accessible to everybody who wants to participate, and that we should abide by open meeting law. NPAs should adhere to state and local laws regarding anti-discrimination, free speech, and accessibility. They should adhere to the provisions of their bylaws and decisions being made in a transparent manner. They should spend money allocated to them in a manner consistent with the city's terms, conditions, restrictions, and that they should set the terms and conditions for their gatherings and shall determine their agendas and priorities. So again, nothing groundbreaking, but when we were looking back at trying to define the relationship, we've never actually written it down anywhere. And I think those are important sort of pieces as a level set. And then the second section here, and it says CEDO. There's a pilot where DFA, Department of Finance Administration, is working on trying to standardize public process throughout the city. So there's a pilot right now where that staff person who works with the NPAs is out of the DFA office. So for the purpose of this, we're using the 2 interchangeably, but essentially that CEDO will develop a standardized process in collaboration with the NPAs by which the NPAs can communicate some sort of list of annual priorities. The thinking here being, DPW as an example, Department of Public Works, has 10,000 different things on their plate at any given time. And they're constantly doing this triaging of genuinely wanting to get feedback on those projects and on their work, but also just realistically not having capacity to like talk about every project at every moment with every NPA. So if the NPAs, if we, again, in collaboration with one another, and this is what we're hoping to direct some of the staff support from the city's end to help facilitate, if sort of city government knows in advance, hey, if something happens to this park in particular in this part of town, we got to go talk to that NPA, and they've communicated that in advance, we'll hopefully have less missteps in communication and hopefully better public process as a result.
Yeah, if I could just add a personal example to that. It's a Ward 1 example. Housing in Ward 1 is highly connected with the university, as it is here too. But a few years back, there was work on a memorandum of understanding about housing development by the university in relationship to the city. And that's exactly the sort of thing that Ward 1 NPA would really want the city to come to the NPA to have a conversation about before signing any MOUs. We think that it's in the spirit of the definition of the NPAs that when decisions are being made about an area of the city, that the NPA should be not the exclusive body that gets consulted, but one of the bodies that gets consulted by the city for public input.
Yes, yeah, that's really well put. The other sections here, just on what we're asking CEDO to do, is to develop some easily understood materials. I served a few years before getting on the council on the NPA Steering Committee in Ward 1, and I didn't know until I became a city councilor that like legally we have a responsibility as NPA Steering Committee members to hold these meetings in accordance with open meeting law. Many of us already do that, but we need to make sure that steering committee members are trained on sort of like the legal responsibilities we have, because if we're not and then somebody messes that up, we can't really set people up for failure and then expect them to be perfect at it. So that's another piece here. Next, we're asking CEDO and any other relevant city staff to make sure that these materials get looked at, these training materials, sort of how-to manuals, for lack of a better term, and get updated on a regular basis. And we put every 3 calendar years, they at least review them. Make sure that, again, train folks on these materials so they understand them. And then, the final piece here is whenever the city is hiring staff roles that are predominantly to do with supporting the NPA from the city staff side, that we have a representative from the NPAs actually on that hiring committee. We do this with a bunch of different positions in city government. Whenever we're making hires in a variety of contexts, you get a bunch of stakeholders together so that we hire the right person and we know what we should be looking for. And so that one seemed like common sense to us that we'd pull in the NPAs to that as well. So I'll give you the last 2 here.
All right, we've kind of switched these around. You got all the juicy ones, but this is the city. The city council acknowledges and agrees that NPAs play an important role in the city's deliberative process. The advice and counsel received from residents at NPA meetings is valuable and important to the city's decision-making processes. Individual city councilors shall be encouraged to regularly attend NPA meetings in their respective ward or district. I think those are pretty straightforward. Issues that impact NPA governance and structure, the city council shall endeavor in good faith to consult with each NPA on issues that impact NPA governance and structure before proceeding with resolutions and ordinances. And I want to point out, and this is just editorial on my part, the move of the NPA administration from CEDO to DFA was done without any consultation with the NPAs. And maybe it's for the better, maybe it's for the worse. We just don't know, and we won't know until this pilot that's going on right now comes out. But it's exactly the sort of thing that I think NPAs deserve to be at least in on when these decisions are being made. City Council shall endeavor in good faith to consult with each NPA on issues that disproportionately impact a particular area of the city. Carter talked about that a little bit, and that if each NPA can make a list of the things that matter most to the NPA, then that ward's counselors know that these are things that really have to come, and it would be a short list, like 3 things. Matters identified by the NPAs as priorities, all development projects that require major impact review. Interestingly, the language that's currently in the documentation strongly urges all major impact review to come to NPAs, but it doesn't require it, and we think it probably should be required. Redistricting and changes to ward boundaries and polling places, that I think is obvious, that will always come to NPAs. And proposed charter changes and ballot questions that appear on the annual town meeting day ballot. Again, it would be unusual for us to get to March without some representative of the city explaining what's on the ballot, but we'd want to make sure that that will happen. So at this point, we can take questions, and then what we're looking for is we're really looking for essentially you're okay with our going forward. There may be items in here that you're not 100% happy with, but you are the 8th of 8 wards we're talking to, and 7 of 8 have gone and nodded and said, yeah, it's okay. And the next step would be for Carter to bring this back to City Council or to a committee, and then bring it up and actually have this thing approved by the City Council ultimately.
And I'm going to go a little off script and at risk of summarizing it, because now this is the 8th one and I am getting better at this. So basically we're saying the NPA and the City Council are going to agree to a set of value statements that acknowledge the value in this relationship on either end of it, that CEDO is going to work with its staff capacity or city government will work with its staff capacity to sort of set up NPA Steering Committee members for success when they're trying to facilitate and run these meetings. And then that we are going to start an imperfect process so that NPAs can communicate the topics that are most important to them to both their elected officials and sort of the bureaucracy of city government, so that we can hopefully make sure that we're more proactive, or at least as much as we can be as a city. So that's the top line there, and yeah, if we want to go to questions.
Yeah, my question is, so before I started at the Ward 2 NPA, the NPA, so we receive a budget from the city, and before I was on the Ward 2 NPA steering committee, the Ward 2 was able to spend some of its money on like community grants. Like Ward 2 gave some money to like Laboratory B to do the like repair cafe that they do, or it was giving money to just like various community organizations that are doing really cool stuff in our community. And then when I joined the NPA, I learned that something in the city said that we can't do that anymore. Like we can only spend the money that we get on like promoting the NPAs themselves. And I'm wondering, when did that change and why did that change? Because I feel like we receive a budget that's like, I don't know, $1,500 or however much it is. And I feel like that money could so much, that would be so cool if we could spend it on like little community projects that we like want to promote in our neighborhoods, and only spending it on promoting the NPAs feels a little self-aggrandizing. I don't know. I'm just curious about that.
So it really is a great question, and if I can be just a little bit lighthearted in an answer, it's like other things in the city where there's codes and ordinances, but there's no enforcement. And this has always been the case, that the rules about spending NPA money has got to be on the NPA meetings, on promotion, on translation services, on childcare, things directly associated with operating a healthy NPA. Those rules weren't enforced until just a couple of years ago. And as a matter of fact, I stumbled into it because for years, the Ward 1 NPA gave money to Front Porch Forum and to Town Meeting TV because you do all the outreach for us. But it turned out that I didn't get reimbursed this year for it. So that's okay. It's clear now. But those rules have been in place for a long time. It's just that they really hadn't been enforced.
And the only other thing I'd say is, and this is not quite to your question, but my hope is that this is sort of like the base, like Ward 2, Ward 1, I don't want to toot our horn, but tend to be not more successful, but more structured, more well-established, more reliable, quote-unquote, MPAs, and certainly have a higher level of engagement than most MPAs in the city. And so I want the MPAs, I mean, my dream, if I could wave a wand, would be like our version of direct democracy in the city would, you know, if I could, again, wave a wand, it would be MPAs have a formal vote, the community itself has a formal vote on the budget every time we pass a budget and we do a 2-year budgeting process and whatever. Down the line someday when we are in a better position, but in order for us to like really grow MPAs across the city, they've just gotta, the basic operations have to work better than they are now. And Ward 2 is an exception, I think. So appreciate your all's work. But, you know, we've had, even in the last 3 years, MPAs, multiple MPAs throughout the city, just like non-functioning. Just multiple MPAs, even in like the last 2 or 3 years, have gotten to a place where they're not even, you know, they're not even really meeting in a practical sense. So, which isn't quite to your question, but.
So I just wanted to clarify next steps regarding passing or not passing in terms of Ward 2's stance on this resolution. Are we past the point of making any edits to the resolution, or can changes be made even once the resolution is brought to City Council?
2 things. I would say what we've said to MPAs when we presented this is we are trying to avoid wordsmithing. So if it's like more wordsmith stuff, we're open to it, but I think because we're going to all 8, plus this earlier process that Jonathan described, and then back to the council, it would just get unwieldy if we get into it. However, if there's like real substantive changes that should be considered, I think we should talk about them. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I would agree, except, and yet with the understanding that I guess what it comes down to is, can Ward 2 agree to this as it stands, or is there something so fundamentally wrong with it that you cannot? And if you cannot, then then the process might have to start over, and we'd have to rewrite it and go back to all the NPAs. So it's at this stage, there's nothing here that can't be changed next year, or we can develop a process where we can make it better. We need to make it better. It's just the first time around. We kind of want to get this going so that it is the first time around. Answer your question, I think if Ward 2 can't accept this, then you should vote against it, and then we figure out what to do about that.
Yeah, like one suggestion, I mean, just to go back to that, one suggestion we had at one MPA was this should come back to the council every year, every 2 years to be voted on again, because part of the problem is that in the same way that there's turnover in city government or in the MPAs, there's obviously turnover in the council. And so even new councilors coming in, especially this last 2 years, with the exception of my wonderful mentor, Councilor Bergman, there isn't actually a lot of institutional knowledge on the council. So a lot of city councilors don't even really, didn't come into the role with a good understanding of what their role in the MPA was or what their relationship ought to be with it. So.
Hello, my name is Solveig Overby, and I have a question about the history of the NPAs originally. And I think one of the issues that maybe that's influencing why people aren't participating is the sense of lack of actually any power to do anything anyway. And when I was looking through this proposal, it looks to me like there's nothing, that NPAs aren't going to have any binding votes that would actually be binding on the city council in any way. This is pretty much just formalizing more the information sharing process. Am I reading that correctly?
Well, yeah, except, first of all, the NPAs are really advisory committees. There is they have no authority. It's been that way since day one.
I hadn't heard that, and I haven't seen the history of that, because I think originally they were actually did have more of an authority, and we've lost that, which I think, you know, again, I would have liked to see that history as part of this. And the reason I'm bringing that up is if it's just a matter of the things that are listed, that the city council will inform the NPAs, they're wonderfully, they play an important role and they're deliberative, but why would you need to have an open meeting law restriction if there's not going to be any votes that have any binding authority whatsoever? The two don't compute for me. If it's just advisory, then you want to do a better job of informing the community. But I think part of the reason that people were finding value in, like, the comment about the finances and giving a fund to do things that are useful to this neighborhood, and that's been lost. It's just chipping away. And people, yes, some people need to come and just vent. They just like to vent and say, I'm going to complain about this, and you want to inform them and let them vent. But if it's not going to have any actual value as a vote that we would take that we know has an important impact, then there's really not a whole lot of point to have this organization. And you're pretty much killing it off by just saying, we promise to do a better job. Here's a wonderful relationship between the NPAs and the city council. So that's my concern about the way this got worded. The NPAs felt like they had some actual impact, and this feels like heading in a direction that, great, we'll have some more structure in the way we communicate, and the rules are going to be so constrictive if you've got to have an open meeting law restriction, and when you don't have a vote that means anything anyway, the two don't go together to me. So that's my comment. I will not support this.
Well, here's what I'll say, because I actually think it's the opposite, but I actually think we're actually in a similar place for where we need to move. One, these restrictions, but open meeting law, budgeting, like the reference to like spending money in accordance with city policies, all that is already the case. Like, that is a legal requirement of NPAs, and when we have had NPA meetings that hasn't abided by open meeting law, it opens us up to a lawsuit. And not many people are going to court over the NPAs, but, you know, in reality, that sort of requirement already exists, regardless of sort of NPA's binding authority over any given decision. I agree with you. I think the reason that it's hard to get people involved, especially in other parts of the city, in the NPAs is because, you know, they can't just be places where we show up and, I mean, there's real value in the information sharing, but if there's not real teeth and decision-making authority, you're not going to see a whole lot of people, unless they have a whole lot of extra time on their hands, come into the NPAs, which is why I think there's a lot of the same, at least in Ward 1, and not to knock us, but I think it's a reality, like, a lot of the same people come every month, right? And so there's not a huge representation of the ward, or at least the extent that it really should be. So what I would say is that, like, to Jonathan's point, like, looking back at the NPA history, and some of that is in the whereas clauses here, they were much more active, and I mean, talking to folks like Terry and other folks who are around who really drove these getting off the ground in the first place, they were really an organizing tool for Sanders and to fight, particularly around the waterfront issue and making it a public space versus it just being privately owned. But since then, it's really waned in its being a central, and Ward 2 in the Old North End, I should say, is pretty much the exception in a lot of respects. But in order for, just to be super frank with you, in order for me to advocate to other folks in city government that NPA should take on more and more authority, the basic operations of the NPA everywhere in the city need to function like Ward 2 does. And right now, that's just not the case. So, like, we do need staff support to start to develop and train those folks to get there, I guess.
But if there is no binding vote happening at an NPA meeting, there's nothing to file a lawsuit about for an open meeting law violation. There's nothing happening. It's you excluded me from being informed. That's not a legal claim. So I feel like there's a missing connection here. If there were actually some authority of the NPAs for spending money that has a binding vote among the NTPA, and or an authority to have a decision made that has binding authority, then you would definitely need to have the open meeting law happen and enforce that. And I completely support open meeting law, but I see a disconnect here. This is, to me, a feel-good, let's just look like we're going to really be organized. And I feel like part of, like I said, it's we're setting up, so institutionalizing it that in fact it is contributing to the demise of the functionality of the NPAs to have this. And if you would put in an element that says there will be binding votes on certain things that you say you want to hear from the NPA about, then the open meeting law should absolutely go together with it. But I think I don't know, there's just a disconnect between those. If it doesn't have any value except all of us talking about it and hearing about things, that's one thing. And we just want to vent. But I just don't see, without it being a binding, something we can actually do something about. We decide it's an important thing we want done in the city or in our community, and we put a resolution together and we vote on it, we follow the open meeting law to vote on it, and it has actual impact. Absolutely, that would be great. But this is missing that part. We have no authority, we're here to listen.
If I could just comment a little bit on that. The open meeting law requirement is from the city attorney's office. And the NPAs are advisory committees within the city government. We are a piece of city government, even if we don't have the kind of authority that you're looking for. And as a result of the fact that we are committees or we are assemblies within city government, the city attorney believes we need to follow open meeting law. It's as basic as that. The NPAs never had hard authority, but what the NPAs have a huge amount of power for is if an NPA or if all the NPAs come together and agree on a resolution, not this sort of thing, but more than 4 miles a year be put on sidewalk repair, for example. No MOUs with the university without there being these specific things. If the NPAs can come together, bring that to city council, it has much more weight than individuals coming to city council and expressing opinions. We can use, if you think of us as an activist group rather than as a governing body, because we're not a governing body. If you think of us as an activist group, we can use that. We can use our activism to make change in the city, but we have to do it with compelling arguments to the only authorities in the city, which are the city government, the city council, the mayor. They're the only people who really have power here. That's the structure of the city.
And as I alluded to earlier, I'd be the first one to be supportive of a charter change that sets up a participatory budgeting process by which we provide that sort of binding authority. You're right to say that this is not that. But I think that this is the unexciting but necessary change to how we operate on sort of the day-to-day that needs to happen to set the stage for that.
And one example that exists now is the Community Development Block Grant Advisory Committee, and the CDBG Advisory Committee is the group in the city that makes decisions about how federal HUD money gets spent by the city, and it's strictly an advisory committee, but it's made up of NPA representatives, of people voted for by the NPAs. And I don't know how many years, how many decades this advisory committee has been in place, but when I was last on it, I was told that, how many? 3 decades? 4 decades? That there has never... Okay, so it transcends this millennium, and there has never been a time that the city council or the mayor has disagreed with the decision of this group. And so that's clout. That is a decision-making way that NPAs are can be engaged. We can, the city can expand that. The city can do advisory budgeting. I mean, there's an opportunity, but only if we tell them we need that or we want that. And that's what the NPAs have the opportunity of doing.
All right, I'm going to stop us there just because we're at time. So I want to make sure to give us time as an MPA in Ward 2 to vote. And just, I'm trying to play proper Robert's rules here. Councilor Newbeiser, based on what you said, it sounds like as opposed to a motion to make any amendments, if you have any suggestions or thoughts for significant changes, the preference would be more to vote against it and then we can handle that, or would we rather have motions to, I mean, I guess I say that if there is any motions on the floor to make an amendment or a proposal for an amendment. We're really tapping my rules towards my knowledge of the Robert's rules. I guess I can also ask before you decide, are there any, would anyone want to motion to make any significant amendment? Just looking around. Okay. I should have asked that to start, but I wanted to play proper Robert's rules. So what we'll do is we'll go through all those who approve, all those who disapprove, and any abstentions. And I'm gonna awkwardly, I'll stand behind you. Just trying not to get the feedback here. That made it worse. As a reminder, please, please only vote if you're a Ward 2 resident. So all those in favor of supporting the amendment that as it is written in front of you, please raise your hand. All those opposed? And any abstentions? All right, so that passes. And with, I guess before I thank our presenters, are there any final questions for Jonathan or Councilor Newbeiser? All right, well, thank you both for coming, preparing that, and I'll keep that up on our website. It is available through our link tree. It'll be linked in our notes. So if you have any further questions, we are happy to connect you with the steering committee on this. But before you go, I know Charlie passed around the raffle, so we are raffling off a City Market gift card and some Halloween cards. It is fall, so I am going to pick the lucky raffle winner. All right. Is there a Jillian? Okay. Gotta stay till the end. She did put her phone number, but unfortunately you do have to stay to the end. Amy! All right. Thank you, everyone. We will be back not next Thursday, October 9th, same time, same place, and I hope to see y'all there.